How does someone earning $300,000 a year have nothing saved? That's not a rhetorical question, it's a diagnostic one. And the answer isn't irresponsibility, it's a mechanism. A specific, measurable, well-documented psychological process that operates on everyone regardless of income level. Yesterday we looked at where the average person stands financially, the median net worth, the debt, the savings rate. Today we go to the other end of the spectrum and find the same problem wearing more expensive clothes. That question has a very specific answer, and it's not the answer you'll find on most finance channels. I'm Warren, and I've spent the last year pulling this apart. Let me show you. About half of Americans earning over $100,000 a year describe themselves as living paycheck to paycheck. And a separate analysis of banking data found that roughly 1 in 5 households earning over $150,000 spend more than 95% of their income on what they classify as necessities. Not luxury purchases. Necessities. At $150,000 a year. The question isn't whether these people are lying. The question is how the word necessity gets redefined as income climbs. And the answer has a name. In 1971, 2 psychologists published a paper that changed how researchers think about happiness and money. The core finding: humans return to a stable baseline level of happiness after both positive and negative life events. Win the lottery, happiness spikes, then settles back. Suffer a serious injury, misery spikes, then settles back. The emotional system recalibrates, it adapts. And that adaptation isn't a flaw. It's how the brain stays sensitive to new threats and opportunities instead of staying saturated by old ones. The concept is called hedonic adaptation, sometimes the hedonic treadmill, and it applies directly to income. Here's what that looks like in a living room. Someone gets promoted, the salary jumps. There's a genuine feeling of expansion, more space, more options, more breathing room. For a few weeks, the bank balance looks different. The Chase app shows a cushion that wasn't there before, and there's a moment, usually late at night, scrolling through the screen where the number feels unfamiliar. Bigger. Calmer. That's the window. That brief period where the brain registers surplus but hasn't yet spent it. And what happens next determines everything. Within a few months, the $300 dinner that felt like a celebration on the old salary starts to feel like a Tuesday on the new one. The business class seat that felt extravagant becomes the minimum for a long flight. The apartment that felt like an achievement becomes the baseline. This isn't weakness. This is neurochemistry. The brain's reward pathways desensitize to repeated stimuli the same way they do with any source of pleasure. And while the brain is normalizing each upgrade, the bank account isn't. The bank account just reflects the gap between what comes in and what goes out. When the brain closes that gap by upgrading spending to match income, the net effect on wealth is zero. And here's what almost nobody says about this because it sounds counterintuitive. The higher the income, the faster the adaptation happens. The person earning $70,000 who gets a $5,000 raise has limited options for where that money goes. It mostly covers existing gaps. The person earning $200,000 who gets a $30,000 raise has an ocean of new options: better car, bigger house, nicer school, more travel. Each option is individually reasonable. Together, they consume the raise in 6 months. The brain doesn't even register the loss because it was never a loss. It was a series of upgrades that each felt earned. An orthopedic surgeon in the Southeast, I think about her case often. Household income, just over $400,000. After more than a decade of post-secondary education and training, she started earning real money at 33. By that point, she carried nearly $400,000 in student loans. Her first attending salary felt like a transformation. After years of residency wages that barely covered rent, suddenly the deposits were 5 figures. Within 18 months, the family had a large mortgage, 2 car payments, a BMW, and a leased Lexus, and both children enrolled in private school. The numbers on paper look like wealth. The cash flow tells a different story. Here's the part that makes this case important. Her total fixed monthly outflow, mortgage, cars, school, insurance, loan payments, utilities, came to about $14,000. After taxes, take-home was roughly $22,000. The gap? $8,000. Sounds huge. But after maxing 2 retirement accounts and setting aside for annual licensing and continuing education, the real breathing room was closer to $2,000. $2,000 of discretionary space on over $400,000 in income. And when I asked whether she felt wealthy, she said she felt like she was running to stand still. That's the treadmill, not as a metaphor, as lived experience. She can see the belt moving under her feet, and she can't step off without the whole structure collapsing because every fixed expense is locked in, and every locked expense was individually reasonable at the time it was signed. The mechanism works in 3 stages, and they repeat with every income increase. Stage 1, the raise arrives, the brain registers surplus. There's real pleasure, a feeling of expansion, like walking out of a small room into open air. Stage 2, the surplus gets allocated, not all at once. Gradually, a nicer apartment, a better restaurant, a new subscription, a weekend trip that used to feel like a splurge and now feels earned. Each individual upgrade is small and defensible. Nobody looks at a single extra $40 a month and thinks this is the thing that'll ruin me. Stage 3, the new spending level becomes the baseline. The surplus vanishes. The brain no longer registers the upgrades as upgrades, they're just normal. And the cycle sits there, dormant, waiting for the next raise to begin again. The surgeon described this perfectly without knowing the term for it. She said, "Every year we make more, and every December I look at the account and wonder where it went." She wasn't describing irresponsibility, she was describing adaptation, the brain resetting its baseline year after year with surgical precision. A product manager in Denver shows the other version. What happens when the intervention comes before the adaptation locks in? She got promoted at 31. Salary jumped from $95,000 to $140,000. The same week the offer letter arrived, she set up an automated transfer for half the raise, roughly $1,100 a month, into a Vanguard index fund. She didn't touch her rent, didn't upgrade the Subaru, didn't change the Costco runs. 6 months later, she said something that stuck with me. She said she honestly forgot she was earning more. The automation captured the raise before her brain had a chance to normalize it, and her lifestyle simply never inflated. That's not the same story as the surgeon's. The surgeon is fighting adaptation after it locked in, contractual obligations, fixed expenses, a structure that can't be easily unwound. The Denver case is prevention. The raise was intercepted at the door. The brain never got the signal to upgrade because the money was gone before it registered. 2 very different problems. 2 very different timelines. Same underlying mechanism, but caught at opposite stages. 3/4 of Americans say they believe more money would solve most of their financial problems. That belief is understandable, and the data says it's wrong. As income rises, spending rises almost in lockstep. The gap stays narrow unless something intervenes. And here's the part that connects this to the architecture we've been building on this channel since video 1. The thing that intervenes is never willpower. It's structure. And this needs to be said bluntly because the polite version doesn't land. The system that creates the high income trap isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed. The bank approves the bigger mortgage because a bigger mortgage means more interest. The dealership offers the lease because the lease means repeat revenue. The private school costs $50,000 because the parents will pay $50,000. Nobody in that chain, not the lender, not the dealer, not the admissions office, has any incentive to say, "This is enough." You're the only person in the entire structure who loses when the gap closes. Everyone else profits. That's not a conspiracy. It's an incentive alignment. And if the counterstructure doesn't get built by the person inside the trap, nobody builds it. Nobody. The surgeon's case makes this concrete. Her gap, that $2,000 a month of real breathing room, isn't going to grow through discipline. She can't willpower her way to a higher savings rate because every fixed cost is contractually locked. The mortgage is a 30-year commitment. The car leases run for 3 years. The school tuition is annual. The only way to widen the gap is to intercept the next income increase before the brain normalizes it. And that means automation set up before the raise hits. For high earners specifically, the protocol from the first 2 videos gets one critical addition. The gap has to be captured at the moment of the income increase, not after. If a raise adds $2,000 a month to take home, the automated transfer needs to increase by at least $1,000 before the first paycheck arrives at the new rate. This is the only reliable defense against hedonic adaptation. Not half, not after adjusting. Before. Because once the brain has experienced 2 months at the higher spending level, that level becomes the new floor. And floors, in financial terms, almost never go back down. Here's why this matters more than any budgeting app or expense tracker. Discipline fades. The brain adapts. Motivation fluctuates. But an automated transfer that runs on the first of the month doesn't care about any of that. It captures the gap before the brain has a chance to close it. The surgeon could have tracked every coffee and subscription. It wouldn't have changed the structural problem. 14,000 in fixed outflow, 2,000 in breathing room, and a brain that's continuously recalibrating what feels normal. The only thing that changed her trajectory was a transfer she set up once and then forgot about. There's a number that captures this entire dynamic better than income, net worth, or any other metric. Savings rate, the percentage of gross income that gets converted to wealth. The surgeon, at a 12% savings rate, puts away about $50,000 a year. Sounds large. But she started at 33 with nearly $400,000 in debt, and she won't be net positive until her mid-40s. The high income doesn't erase the late start. It just hides it, because the lifestyle signals wealth that the balance sheet doesn't confirm. This is why I keep coming back to the same principle across these videos. The variable that determines financial outcome isn't income, it's the gap. A person earning $70,000 with a 20% savings rate will build more wealth over 30 years than a person earning $300,000 with a 4% rate. The math isn't close, and the reason isn't complicated. Compound interest rewards consistency, not magnitude. The adaptation eats magnitude. Architecture protects consistency. Here's another way to see it. 3 people. The surgeon earning over $400,000 with a 12% savings rate, net positive by her mid-40s. The product manager in Denver earning $140,000 with a savings rate north of 30% because she captured the raise before adaptation took hold. And the substitute teacher from yesterday's video earning $44,000 with an 8% rate, built on a $150 transfer she set up once. 3 completely different incomes. The person with the smallest paycheck will hit the $10,000 threshold first, because she started with 0 overhead and 0 adaptation to unwind. The person with the largest paycheck will hit it last, because she's digging out from under $400,000 in student debt. Income isn't the variable. The gap is the variable. And the gap is determined by when the automation starts relative to the moment the brain normalizes the income. The surgeon called me back 4 months after that first conversation. She'd set up one automated transfer, $1,500 a month, into a brokerage account, timed to the day after payday. She hadn't changed her other expenses, hadn't cut anything, hadn't felt any sacrifice. $1,500 a month, automatically, invisibly. She said the strangest part was that she didn't notice it. The money moved before she saw it, and her brain adjusted to the lower checking balance within weeks. 4 months, $6,000. Still below the threshold we talked about in video 1. But the gears were turning in the right direction for the first time. And the part that mattered most, she said she hadn't thought about money less often, but she'd started thinking about it differently. Less dread. More like watching something grow. That shift from dread to growth is the same shift we described in video 1 at a different income level. The brain doesn't care whether the account crossed $10,000 from $44,000 in income, $140,000, or $400,000. It cares about direction. And the only thing that reliably controls direction isn't discipline, or budgeting, or motivation. It's a transfer that runs without asking permission. The teacher in Raleigh, the product manager in Denver, the surgeon in the Southeast, different incomes, different timelines, identical mechanism. If you earn above $100,000 and your savings rate hasn't grown with your income over the last 3 years, the cycle is already running. That's not a character failure. It's the default output of a brain that wasn't built for abundance. But if you don't lock the gap in the next 12 months, before the next raise, before the next lease renewal, before the next tuition cycle, it speeds up. And every year inside, it costs you not just money, but the one thing money is actually supposed to buy, the option to stop running. The surgeon figured that out on a Sunday night with a legal pad. The question is whether you figure it out before or after the next raise disappears. Tomorrow, the single most concrete example of this trap in daily life. The $900 monthly car payment. Why it's the most destructive recurring expense in most household budgets, not because of the amount, but because of what it prevents. The compound interest that never gets a chance to start. The math on that one will change how you look at every car dealership for the rest of your life.